The Florida House is planning to take up a bill that would allow all Florida students to be eligible for state scholarships that pay for private schooling or homeschooling.
This means parents who now homeschool their kids or pay private school tuition out of pocket could get state funds to help offset those expenses should the bill pass in session. This adds additional cost to the state's education budget, and critics fear public school students will pay the price. The bill says students in low-income households will still be first priority. The bill also aims to reduce a waiting list, which now has more than 9,000 names. For more on this, we're joined by Facing South Florida host Jim DeFede.
Jim, this is the latest evolution we've seen from this voucher program for the last 20 years in the state of Florida, isn't it?
It certainly is. You know, it goes back to, this was something that Jeb Bush put into place, and at the time the idea was that you wanted to give parents whose children went to failing schools the opportunity to take them somewhere else. Well, that started as that program, and then every year the state has tried to expand it more and more. So now we're not even making the pretense that this is about competition or failing schools. This is now the state's effort to essentially try to replace public education with private education. That if you want to take your dollars and go to a private school, or if you want to homeschool your child, you can now qualify for state funds. The result of that is likely to be that you're going to see an immediate decrease in funding for public schools, which are going to further deteriorate public schools. That's the fear among many on the Democratic side, and as well as the public teachers. Now, of course, parents like the idea of being able to have those dollars to be able to choose where their child goes to school. I understand that. But remember something that's really important here. The state constitution requires that the state of Florida provide public education. If you are not able to fund public education, how can you meet the burden under the state constitution? That's going to be a central question. Now, I'm not under any illusions. I think this will pass. This is something that you're going to see with a supermajority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate, and a governor who's supportive of this. This will pass, but the ramifications of it may be felt for a very long time.
Jim, obviously, as you mentioned, the big issue will be the funding for these public schools. But what are sort of the trickle-down effects of that reduced funding? We're talking teachers who likely be leaving, and of course, students not getting the education that they so rightly deserve, right?
That's the concern. You know, like, how are you going to be able to run public schools? And it's not just that. I mean, even I spoke, and we'll hear some sound from State Senator Jason Pizzo in the next hour. But one of the issues that's of real concern is, what are the standards by which, you know, these private ventures, these private schools, or the home schools are going to be measured by to make sure that tax dollars are being properly spent. Right now, we have a system where we are testing students in public schools. We know that which districts are A districts, which schools are A schools, which schools are B schools, which schools are failing. You're not going to see that, you know, with private dollars, and you're going to end up seeing the potential to have a lot of pop-up schools suddenly come out of nowhere at the idea of being able to get public tax dollars into them and lure parents to them. So we've seen a number of private schools fail because of funding issues and theft and fraud and all the rest of it. It's you know, there are some very, very, very good private schools, but not all of them are being measured by that same standard. And that's the fear as well, is what's the accountability going to be? Yeah,
another fear, just to mention, is that some of these private schools are run by for-profit companies that are giving money to politicians in Tallahassee who are making these decisions. We don't have a lot of time, but that is a concern, right, Jim?
No, absolutely. I mean, public schools are not a for-profit endeavor. A lot of these private schools, as you point out, are for-profit. So they've got to find a way to make money, you know, and is that diverting money from going to a child's education? Look, education has been under assault in the state of Florida and across the country for the last few years, and this is just the latest example of it. The debate will be interesting once it gets started in March, but both the Senate President and the House Speaker are firmly behind this, as I would expect the governor to be. So, as I said, I think this will pass.
All right, Jim, certainly going to be keeping tabs on this one. Thank you, as always, for your insight. Don't forget to join Jim DeFede on Sunday for Facing South Florida. That starts at 11:30 a.m.